Picture this. August 480 BC. A narrow coastal pass in central Greece called Thermopylae, the Hot Gates. 7,000 Greek soldiers are settling into defensive positions along a choke point where mountains squeeze against the sea. They're holding a bottleneck that funnels any invading army into a killing corridor barely wide enough for a few carts. It seems like a perfect defensive setup. Then the horizon goes dark. Not with storm clouds, with the dust of the largest invasion force the ancient world had ever assembled. Xerxes, king of Persia, arrives with an army so vast that ancient sources claim they drank rivers dry. Modern estimates? Somewhere between 120,000 to 300,000 soldiers, along with cavalry, archers, and elite shock troops called the Immortals. The Greeks are outnumbered at minimum 20 to 1, possibly 40 to 1. This isn't a battle. It's a suicide mission masquerading as a defensive stand. This isn't Hollywood. This isn't the muscled CGI warriors you've seen in theaters. This was the reality of Greece in 480 BC, a collection of fractured city-states that spent more time fighting each other than anyone else, now forced to coordinate against an empire that stretched from Egypt to India. And one Spartan king named Leonidas just made the decision to stay at this pass with 300 of his personal guard, knowing exactly how it would end. Because this was Greece's second Persian invasion. 10 years earlier, Athens had barely survived at Marathon, and now Xerxes, the son of the defeated Persian king, was back with a force large enough to swallow nations. The Greek alliance was fragile, plagued by political infighting and competing interests. Some city-states had already surrendered. Others were waiting to see who'd win before picking sides. But at Thermopylae, a small rearguard of Spartans, Thespians, and allied Greeks made a choice. Die buying time for the rest of Greece to evacuate cities, reposition fleets, and prepare for the real fight that would come at sea. They weren't heroes seeking glory. They were soldiers done with retreating, done with watching Persia devour the world city by city. This sets the stage for one of history's most legendary last stands. A 3-day meat grinder where geography became a weapon, where heavy infantry turned a narrow pass into a slaughterhouse for wave after wave of Persian troops, and where betrayal on a mountain path would ultimately seal their fate. From holding the line to dying on a hill called Kolonos, covered in arrows and fighting with broken spears and bare hands. This is the story of how 300 Spartans and 700 Thespians became the shield that saved Western civilization. If you're watching from anywhere in the world right now, whether you're in Athens, Tehran, London, or Los Angeles, the battle I'm about to walk you through helped shape the world you live in. So hit that like button, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and let's dive into the real story of Thermopylae. The terrain, the tactics, the betrayal, and the brutal final hours that turned a military defeat into an immortal victory. Stay with me here, because context matters. This wasn't Persia's first attempt. 10 years before Thermopylae, King Darius, Xerxes' father, sent an invasion force to punish Athens for supporting a rebellion. That force landed at Marathon, and against all odds, the Athenians crushed them. Darius died before he could try again. Now his son sits on the throne, and Xerxes isn't here to punish a city, he's here to swallow a civilization. But here's the problem. Greece isn't a nation, it's a mess, dozens of city-states, each with its own army, its own agenda, its own grudges. Sparta dominates on land, Athens rules the sea, and they barely trust each other. Some Greek cities have already bent the knee to Persia. Others are playing both sides, waiting to see which way the wind blows. Think about that. You're trying to coordinate a defense against the largest army ever assembled, and half your allies might switch sides tomorrow. This is the political chaos Leonidas walks into. Not a unified nation rising to defend freedom, but a fragile coalition held together by fear, pride, and the desperate hope that someone, somewhere, can slow the Persian tide long enough for the rest to survive. So why here? Why this narrow strip of coastline? Look at a map. Northern Greece funnels into a coastal pass where the mountains nearly kiss the sea. In 480 BC, this gap was barely wide enough for a single wagon track. Today, sediment has pushed the coastline out. The battlefield looks nothing like it did. But back then, it was a wall made by nature, Thermopylae, the hot gates, named for the thermal springs that steam from the rocks. This is where geography becomes a weapon. Persian cavalry? Useless. There's no room to maneuver. Persian archers? They need distance to be effective. The pass denies them that distance. Persian numbers? Meaningless. You can only fit so many men through a bottleneck at once. Watch what happens next. The Greeks rebuild an ancient wall, the Phocian Wall, across the narrowest point. Now any Persian assault has to funnel through a killing corridor, face a fortified position, and fight the most heavily armored infantry in the ancient world. But Thermopylae isn't just about holding ground. 60 miles south, a Greek fleet holds position at Artemisium, land and sea working together. If the pass holds, the fleet is protected. If the fleet holds, no Persian ships can land troops behind the pass. The strategy is simple. Buy time. Time for Athens to evacuate. Time for the fleet to prepare for the real battle. Time for Greece to survive. Leonidas doesn't need to win. He just needs to hold. Now put yourself on the other side. You're a Persian soldier. You've marched from the edges of India, from the deserts of Egypt, from every corner of an empire that spans 3 continents. Your king commands the greatest army the world has ever seen. Ancient historians say millions. That's exaggeration. But even conservative modern estimates put the number between 120,000 and 300,000 fighting men. You have archers who can darken the sky, cavalry that can sweep flanks, and at the heart of it all, the immortals. 10,000 elite shock troops, always maintained at exactly that number. When one falls, another immediately takes his place. They've never been stopped. Your king, Xerxes, arrives at the pass. He sees this tiny Greek force. He waits. 4 days. He's so confident that he expects them to run, to scatter, to surrender like so many others. They don't move. Here's where it gets strange. Xerxes sends a messenger. Surrender your weapons. The response comes back, attributed to Leonidas himself. Come and take them. 4 words. The most famous military reply in history. The waiting ends, the killing begins. Now let's kill a myth. You've heard of the 300 Spartans. Everyone has. But here's what the movies don't tell you. They weren't alone. Not even close. The initial Greek force at Thermopylae numbered around 7,000 men. Soldiers from across the Greek world. Thespians, Thebans, Phocians, Corinthians, and others. The 300 Spartans were Leonidas's personal guard. Elite, yes. The core of the defense, absolutely. But they commanded a coalition. So why only 300 Spartans? Timing. A religious festival, the Carneia, prevented Sparta from mobilizing its full army. Leonidas could only bring a small force. But here's the detail that matters. He handpicked these 300. Every single one of them had a living son. Their bloodlines would continue. They were chosen to die. Think about that for a second. Leonidas knew. From the moment he left Sparta, he knew he wasn't coming back. And he brought men who knew the same thing. So how does a force of 7,000 hold against 200,000? The answer is bronze and discipline. Greek hoplites were walking tanks. 30 pounds of bronze armor, helmet, breastplate, greaves, a massive round shield called an aspis, 3 feet across, designed to protect not just you, but the man to your left. A 9-foot spear, a short sword for close work. Now multiply that by thousands and lock them together, the phalanx. Interlocking shields forming a wall of bronze, spears bristling over the top in layered rows. The front rank stabs. The ranks behind add pressure. It's not about individual skill, it's about mass, coordination, discipline. Stay with me. In open ground, the phalanx has weaknesses. Flanks can be turned. Cavalry can harass. Archers can thin the ranks from distance. But in a narrow pass, where the enemy can only come straight at you, where there's no room to flank, no space for horses, no distance for arrows, the phalanx becomes a meat grinder. And the Greeks knew it. Every Persian soldier who enters that corridor has to face the bronze wall head-on. Numbers don't matter when you can only fight 3 men at a time. The greatest army in the world is about to be fed into a funnel, and on the other end, the Spartans are waiting. The first Persian wave hits at dawn. Xerxes sends his median infantry, good soldiers, experienced fighters. They pour into the pass, expecting to sweep aside this small Greek force. What they find instead is a wall of bronze and death. The corridor is so narrow that only a handful of Persians can engage at once. They crash against the phalanx, and the killing starts. Spears punch through wicker shields. Bronze-tipped death finds throats, chests, faces. The Persians press forward. The men behind shove the men in front directly onto Greek spear points. Watch what happens next. The Greeks rotate. Fresh units cycle to the front while exhausted men fall back to rest. It's organized, mechanical. The Spartans fight. Then the Thespians take over. Then another contingent. The Persians have no such system. They're feeding men into a grinder with no way to relieve the pressure. Hours pass. The Persian dead pile up in the narrow corridor. Men stumble over corpses to reach the Greek line, exhausted before they even engage. The pass becomes slick with blood. By evening, the first wave is shattered. Xerxes watches from his throne. Yes, he had a throne carried to the battlefield. He watches his soldiers die in heaps, and for the first time, something cold settles in his chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. Day 2. Xerxes is done with probing attacks. He sends the immortals, 10,000 of Persia's finest warriors, the elite of the elite. They've crushed armies across 3 continents. Their reputation alone has broken enemy morale before battle even began. They march into the pass with absolute confidence. The result is exactly the same. The immortals slam into the phalanx and die like everyone else. Their lighter armor, designed for mobility, becomes a death sentence against Greek spear points. Their numbers mean nothing in the choke point. They push forward, and the Greeks simply kill them, faster. Here's where Spartan discipline becomes legendary. The Greeks begin using feigned retreats. They fall back in apparent disorder. The immortals surge forward, sensing victory, and the Greeks suddenly wheel around, reform the phalanx, and butcher the overextended Persians. It's a tactic that requires absolute trust. One man breaks formation too early, the whole line collapses. But the Spartans execute it perfectly, again and again. Think about that. In the chaos of battle, covered in blood, surrounded by screaming men, they're running planned tactical maneuvers like it's a training exercise. That's not courage, that's programming, a lifetime of brutal Spartan training turning men into weapons. By the end of day 2, Xerxes has lost thousands, maybe tens of thousands. The pass holds. The Greeks are bloodied but unbroken. The greatest army in the world cannot move a single mile. And then, as darkness falls, a Greek traitor walks into the Persian camp. His name was Ephialtes, local Greek. Some sources say he wanted money. Others say he had grievances against his own people. The motive doesn't matter. What matters is what he knew. There was another path, a mountain trail called the Thermopylae path. It wound through the hills above Thermopylae, bypassing the pass entirely. If a force could navigate it at night, they'd emerge behind the Greek lines by dawn. Ephialtes led the Persians himself. Xerxes sent a detachment of his best troops, possibly the surviving immortals, up the mountain in darkness. 1,000 men picking their way along goat trails, guided by a traitor who knew every twist and turn. The Greeks weren't stupid. They knew the path existed. A contingent of Phocian soldiers, around 1,000 men, had been posted to guard it. But when the Persians came through in the pre-dawn darkness, the Phocians were caught off guard. Whether they fought and were overwhelmed or simply retreated to defend their own homeland, the sources disagree. The result doesn't. At dawn on day 3, runners reach Leonidas with the news. The Persians are coming down the mountain. Within hours, they'll emerge behind the Greek position. The pass is lost. The trap is closing. Stay with me. This is where the legend is made. Leonidas calls a council. The situation is clear. If they stay, they die. The entire force will be encircled and annihilated. There is no tactical reason to remain. He dismisses the allies. Most of the Greek force, thousands of men, are ordered to retreat. Save yourselves. Fight another day. The war isn't over, but someone has to cover the retreat. Someone has to hold the pass long enough for the others to escape. Someone has to die so the rest can live. The 300 Spartans stay. They were already dead the moment Leonidas chose them. And then something unexpected happens. 700 Thespians refuse to leave. Not Spartans, not warriors from a city famous for war. Men from Thermopylae, a small city most people have never heard of. They volunteer to die alongside the Spartans. No orders, no obligation. They simply refuse to abandon the line. Here's where it gets strange. History remembers the 300. Movies are made about the 300. The 700 Thespians who made the same choice, who died in the same place, who fought to the same last breath. They're a footnote. Think about that the next time someone talks about Spartan glory. The Thebans stayed too. Around 400 of them. Some sources say they were forced to remain as hostages. Others say they chose to fight. We'll never know for certain. What we know is this. Roughly 1,100 men watched their allies march away to safety, then turned to face an army of over 100,000. The last stand begins. The third dawn breaks over Thermopylae. Leonidas knows the Persians are coming from both directions now. The pass that protected them will become their tomb. There's no defensive advantage anymore. No rotating fresh troops, no phalanx holding an unbreakable line. So he attacks. Put yourself in that Persian line for a moment. You've watched this pass eat your army for 2 days. You've seen the greatest warriors in the empire cut down like wheat. And now, as your flanking force descends the mountain, you expect the Greeks to surrender, to break, to beg. Instead, they charge. The Greeks abandon the narrow point of the pass and push forward into the wider part of the corridor. They know they're going to die. They want to take as many Persians with them as possible. The fighting is beyond brutal. This isn't organized warfare anymore. It's slaughter on both sides. Spears shatter against shields. Men switch to swords. Swords break. They fight with shield edges, with rocks, with bare hands and teeth. Herodotus describes what comes next. Leonidas falls. The Spartan king goes down in the press of bodies. The Persians try to claim his corpse, a trophy beyond measure. The remaining Greeks throw themselves over his body. 4 times the Persians seize him. 4 times the Greeks drive them back and recover their king. 4 times. Think about what that means. Outnumbered hundreds to 1, surrounded, exhausted, dying, and they will not let the enemy take their king's body. But the circle grows smaller. The survivors retreat to a small hill called Kolonos, a low mound at the edge of the pass. They form a final perimeter, shields locked, waiting. The Persians don't engage anymore. Why would they? They've won. They stand back and let the archers work. Wave after wave of arrows fall on that hill. The Greeks crouch behind their shields as the sky goes dark. And here's where that famous line comes from. the one attributed to the Spartan Xerxes. When told that Persian arrows would be so numerous they'd block out the sun, he reportedly laughed and said, "Good, then we'll fight in the shade." They died in the shade. The last Greeks on Kolonos Hill, buried under a storm of arrows, fighting until there was no one left to fight. 1,100 men who held the line for 3 days against the largest army in the ancient world. The pass falls. Xerxes walks through. But the price was catastrophic. Thousands of Persians dead. Maybe 20,000. Some sources say more. 2 of Xerxes' own brothers killed in the fighting. 3 days lost. 3 days that changed everything. Xerxes stands in the pass. His army finally moves south. On the surface, this looks like total victory. It isn't. Those 3 days cost Persia everything. While the Greeks held Thermopylae, their fleet fought the Persian navy to a standstill at Artemisium. Neither side won decisively, but the Greek ships survived. They retreated in good order. They were still a fighting force. Those 3 days gave Athens time to evacuate. When Xerxes finally reaches the city, he finds it empty. He burns the temples. He destroys the Acropolis. He's conquered a ghost town. And those 3 days let the Greek coalition regroup at Salamis. Watch what happens next. Weeks after, Thermopylae, the Persian fleet sails into the narrow straits at Salamis. They expect to crush the remaining Greek ships. Instead, they sail into another choke point, and the Greeks tear them apart. Persian numbers mean nothing in the tight waters. Ship after ship goes down. Xerxes watches from the shore as his navy is annihilated. Stay with me. Without naval superiority, the Persian supply lines stretch thin. Xerxes returns to Asia, leaving his general Mardonius to finish the conquest. The following year, at Plataea, the combined Greek army finally meets the Persians on open ground. The Greeks win, decisively. Mardonius dies on the field. The Persian invasion ends. The war is over. And it all traces back to a 3-day stand at a narrow pass. 1,100 men who refused to retreat gave Greece the time it needed to survive. A military defeat became a strategic victory. But here's the thing about Thermopylae. The strategic impact mattered. The time bought was crucial. But that's not why we're still talking about it 2,500 years later. We remember Thermopylae because of what it meant. Herodotus immortalized the story within a generation. His account in Book 7 of the Histories became the foundation for everything that followed. He recorded the names, the numbers, the moments of defiance that echo across millennia. The epitaph, attributed to the poet Simonides, was carved into a stone at the burial site. "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here obedient to their laws we lie." Think about that. Not, "we died heroes." Not, "we saved Greece." Just, "we followed orders. We did our duty. That's the Spartan way. No glory-seeking, no drama. Just soldiers who held the line because that's what soldiers do." And then there's Xerxes, the Spartan who laughed at the idea of arrows blocking the sun. "Then we'll fight in the shade." That single line, maybe apocryphal, maybe real, captures something essential: Spartan wit, laconic humor in the face of certain death. The refusal to be intimidated even when intimidation is the only rational response. This is why the story survives. Not because it was a victory, it wasn't. Not because it saved Greece single-handedly, it didn't. But because it gave the Western world a template for heroic sacrifice. The few against the many. Free men against an empire. Discipline against chaos. Choosing death over submission. Every last stand since Thermopylae echoes those 3 days. Every hold the line story carries DNA from that narrow pass. The Spartans didn't just buy time, they bought immortality. But let's be honest about what we've mythologized and what actually happened. The Persian numbers weren't millions. Ancient sources loved exaggeration. Modern historians put the realistic figure between 120,000 and 300,000. Still overwhelming, still impossible odds. But not the cosmic horde of legend. And it wasn't just 300. This is important. The 300 Spartans narrative erases everyone else. 7,000 Greeks held that pass on day one. 1,100 stayed for the last stand. The 700 Thespians made the exact same sacrifice as the Spartans. They chose to die rather than abandon their allies. History forgot them anyway. Ask anyone about Thermopylae. They'll mention Spartans. They won't mention Thespio, a city that sent 700 of its men to certain death, that lost a generation of warriors in someone else's war, that sacrificed everything, and got written out of the story because Sparta had better publicity. Think about that the next time someone glorifies the 300. Here's what's real. The terrain advantage was real. The Greeks understood exactly how to use that pass. Military genius, not just courage. The 3-day stand happened. Archaeological evidence confirms it. Arrowheads found on Kolonos Hill. Landscape analysis matching Herodotus's descriptions. The physical proof is there. The betrayal was real. The mountain path existed. Someone showed the Persians the way. Whether Ephialtes was his actual name, whether his motives were as simple as greed, that's lost to history. The last stand was real. Men stayed when they could have left. They died on that hill. The earth there soaked up their blood. What's myth is the simplicity, the clean narrative of freedom versus tyranny. Many Greeks collaborated with Persia. Some city-states surrendered willingly. The politics were messy, the alliances fragile, the motivations complex. But complexity doesn't survive 2,500 years. Stories do. And the story of 1,100 men holding a narrow pass against an empire, that story was too powerful to let truth get in the way. So why does this battle still matter? Because the themes are universal. Underdogs facing impossible odds. We see ourselves in that. Every person who's ever felt outnumbered, outgunned, overwhelmed, Thermopylae says, you can still matter. You can still hold the line. The outcome isn't everything. Sacrifice for something larger than yourself. The men who stayed knew they were dying. They stayed anyway. Not for glory. There would be no survivors to spread their fame. They stayed because the alternative was unthinkable. Discipline and training against raw numbers. The phalanx didn't win because Greeks were braver. It won because they were better prepared. Tactics, coordination, years of training applied at the perfect moment. There's a lesson there. Here's where it gets strange. Every military academy on Earth teaches Thermopylae, not as a victory, as a lesson in strategic delay, in terrain utilization, in the psychology of resistance. 25 centuries later, generals still study what Leonidas did at that pass. And culturally, the fingerprints are everywhere. Every war movie where the small unit holds the bridge. Every story where heroes stay behind so others can escape. Every time someone says, hold the line, and means it as more than tactics, that's Thermopylae echoing through time. The Spartans and Thespians didn't just fight a battle. They created a myth powerful enough to shape civilizations. 3 days. That's what it came down to. 3 days in August, 480 BC. A narrow pass where mountains meet the sea. 1,100 men against an empire. They lost. Thermopylae fell. Every single man who stayed for the last stand died on that hill. And yet, those 3 days broke the momentum of the largest invasion the ancient world had ever seen. Those 3 days gave Greece the time to survive, to regroup, to fight back and win. A military defeat became the foundation of a strategic victory. But more than that, those 3 days became immortal. The 300 Spartans, the 700 Thespians, the soldiers from a dozen city-states who held the line when holding the line was all that mattered. They didn't know they were shaping Western civilization. They didn't know poets would sing their names for millennia. They were just men doing a job, following orders, refusing to retreat. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. 2,500 years, we're still telling them. If you made it this far, you're clearly into military history. Drop a comment telling me which battle I should cover next. I read every single one. Hit subscribe if you want more deep dives like this. And share this video with someone who thinks the 300 movie was historically accurate. They need to know about the Thespians. Kolonos Hill still exists. It's smaller than you'd think. A low mound by a highway in modern Greece, surrounded by industrial buildings and tourist signs. The hot springs still steam nearby. The pass is gone. 25 centuries of sediment pushed the coastline miles from the ancient battlefield. But if you stand there at dawn, when the light breaks over the mountains, you can almost see them. 7,000 held the line. 1,100 never left. The earth remembers.